In this week's session, we'll talk about one of the automation way, which is AWS CLI. There are multiple ways to automate our infrastructure. You might be knowing Terraform, which is for infra as code, and then you have CDK, you have CloudFormation, and even you have directly the AWS SDKs using the Node.js or Python based of API calls at the backend. And then there is one more simplistic way, which is the AWS CLI. If you see the comparison, the infra as code Terraform or CloudFormation, which is generally used to create a resource, and then you can track the changes, the historical changes, because you go as a infra as code approach, you'll be managing the infrastructure snippet in the Git repository, so you know who changed, what changed, and easy to roll back. Same way, if you are not good in terms of writing the infra as code, the encapsulated version is the CDK. So you just run the command. At the backend, it's going to create you the CloudFormation snippet for you. The other way, which is the AWS SDK, which is can be like need multiple lines of code where you import the SDK and then you perform the action. There is another version which AWS offers is the CLI. The major use case for CLI, it's more like querying it. So that's where it comes very handy. Let's say if you have 100 S3 buckets in your system, or you want to do a quick change or query, or n number of repeated actions are scripted, then you can easily integrate this CLI, the command line interface, into your workflow, day-to-day workflow. Here we will talk about the generic ones, like how you can use it, the documentation part, so that not just the tooling which you know, but anything which comes in the future, you also good at it. The prerequisite for the CLI, you need to install the CLI in your local machine. I will also link the command to you, so if you are going for the terminal, you should be able to see the CLI is installed in your session or not. So currently I'm using the CLI 2.13 and then 3.8.8. Now let's talk about how to do the CLI commands or execute it, right? So first thing, you want to have the AWS credentials in your local machine. I'll just copy the credentials and run it out. So currently I have exported the credentials. Now let's try to navigate to the one of the service S3 and how can we use the command. So the general format is you would go with the keyword AWS and then the service name and the command which offers. Click Google for like AWS service name on the CLI. The first link would generally take you to the reference page of that CLI. It's AWS S3 and then the service name. If you scroll down, you can see what are the available commands. Let's take an example of ls as the command, and it gives you a description like what are the things it would do. This is going to list you all the S3 buckets and what are the parameters it supports, and also it says whether that specific parameter is optional or mandatory. In this case, you would do AWS S3 and then ls. This is going to list down all the S3 buckets which are placed in your AWS account. You don't need to go to the console. If your task is something like, hey, fetch me what are the S3 buckets in our account, we want to audit it, right? You don't need to go with fancy SDK or snippets like that. You can just come to the CLI and then do a query for it. And the best thing is if the task is, hey, I need a bucket name that starts with TP, you can combine this CLI with the bash scripting or Linux command. So you can pipeline it and then say grep TP. So then it's going to list down all the bucket names that starts with the TP. And let's say if your manager is saying that, I want all this in a separate file, you can do like tp-s3.txt. This is going to output into a separate file. If you do this one, all recorded in the text file, you can just straight away share it to your manager. So you can combine the output of the command and then use the bash scripting logic into it. This also gives you options like move a file from your local machine and directly upload it to the S3 bucket. So you can say like cp and then you upload from the local into S3 URI. If I go for the S3 bucket, and so this will become handy. Let's say if you don't have console access, but all you have is the CLI access. In certain company for developers, you might not get console access, but you want to play with it, this would come more handy for you. With the CLI, you can do all the basic actions which you would generally do it in the. So let's say if I go for maybe like course evidhai, and currently you see only one file I have called hands-on-plan.html, and if I go for the cp, and what is the syntax, you can see, right? It starts with the logo AWS, comes with cp like S3, or you can also directly see here like AWS space S3 space the command line cp followed by your local path and then the S3 URI. Okay, so let's try to upload the file which we had created, right? So in the previous command we created a file called tp-s3.txt. So what is the syntax? We saw AWS S3 CP and then your local file, which would be the tp-s3.txt, followed by your S3 URL. If you already have a file name, let's say like this, then this is your S3 URI, and you can copy this for reference and just change the file name. Let's say we'll copy it as I can keep the same name as it is, so that would be your object name. So if I do this, what's going to happen is it's uploaded the file from a local machine to the S3 bucket. The file is in the bucket with the terminal itself. So any manual action which you do, it's possible to do it in the CLI. For any beginners, if you're trying to learn, all the tutorials you would see in the internet or in YouTube, it's in the click option, right? So you go, they will say like go and upload, click next, and then I can also show you like how it would look like, right? So if I go for like add files, and let's say if I go here and I'm opening it, so you see like how many clicks I'm doing it with the terminal. If you have it in locally, then you saw how fast we could do it. So that's how makes difference how you think in terms of automation. There is not much new concept you learn. You know how to navigate, and then you get used to it. So any new service you do, try to get the understanding of it. Let's see like what other options available. Let's see, do we have service for IAM? So yeah, there is one exist for IAM, and let's see if we can, you see like what are the options available. Or if you're a beginner, you would be creating a group, that option is there. You can have delete, all the things are there. So let's try to do get group, right? So let's see like what it does. So you need a group name to do it. But if I don't know the group name, what would be the scenario? Let's say, is there anything around a list? You see, I have list groups. So this is going to list all the group names in my account, and the syntax is straightforward. AWS IAM, and then I'm going to do list groups, and anything specific it needed, everything it's in options. So AWS IAM and then list groups. It's going to list all the IAM group names in my AWS account, and now you see currently it is in JSON formatted. You have the list groups, and to get the more details, you generally have like something like get, and then you have a group. So this is going to consist of get group and the group name itself. So AWS IAM, and then you have get group, the group name. So since now you know what are the group names available, you can use like tp-demo for example. So now you get all the details of the group, what is the ARN and those kind of things. You can assess it via the CLI. And so this also you give you the context how important your credentials are. It's not just your username and password, but your API credentials also like very sensitive. So always try to don't share it or store it in the plain text in your Git repository or anywhere. It should be confidential and it should be stored within yourself. Okay, so that's the main purpose why the CLI credentials are very sensitive. Without even logging to the console, you can just do the simplistic AWS CLI command and get all the details of your account. And if your credentials is having access of updating the user permission, they can even hijack your user details and stuff. So this is how the CLI can comes handy. Whichever is optional, it's being documented within a square bracket. If it is mandatory, it's without the square bracket. So you can also try to know the readability of the documentation. If it's within the square bracket, it's optional to pass. If it's without the square bracket, it's mandatory to pass. So that's how the CLI generally works. Yeah.